The stars looked different from the bridge of the U.S. Defiant. Captain John Miller had spent 20 years in space, but he never got used to how the stars changed once you went faster than light. They stretched and bent in ways that hurt the human eye. "Captain, we're picking up a signal," said Communications Officer Mary Jones. Her fingers moved quickly across her screen. "It's not one of ours." Miller walked to her station. The year was 2157, and humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 years ago. They hadn't met anyone else out here yet. Everyone on the bridge fell silent. "Play it," Miller ordered. A sound filled the bridge. It wasn't a voice or words. It was something between a song and a cry for help. "It's a distress signal," said First Officer Alan West. "Has to be." Miller nodded. "How far?" 2 light hours from our position," Mary said. Miller didn't hesitate. "Set course. Standard rescue protocols." The U.S. Defiant changed direction, its engines glowing blue against the black of space. 4 hours later, they arrived at the source of the signal. It was a ship, but unlike anything they had ever built. It was round and smooth, with no visible engines or weapons. It floated dead in space, its surface reflecting the light of a nearby star. "Scan it," Miller ordered. Science Officer Kate Brown worked her station. "I'm picking up life signs. Oxygen atmosphere inside. Temperature suitable for human life. No radiation or biological hazards detected." "They could be like us," Miller said softly. "Or they could be waiting to kill us," West added. Miller considered his options. Humanity's first contact with alien life would happen under his command. The weight of it pressed on his shoulders. "Prepare a boarding team." "I'll lead it," Miller decided. 30 minutes later, Miller floated through a tube connecting the Defiant to the alien vessel. With him were West, Brown, and Security Chief Great Harris. They all carried standard-issue weapons, but kept them holstered. They entered through what seemed to be an airlock. Inside, the corridors were curved and lined with a material that glowed softly. The air smelled clean, with a hint of something like cinnamon. "Hello," Miller called out. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." A sound came from around a bend in the corridor. The team tensed. Then a figure stepped into view. It was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. Its face had 2 large eyes that blinked vertically, and a small mouth. It wore what looked like flowing robes. "You are humans?" it asked in perfect English. Miller was too shocked to be surprised by its knowledge of their language. "Yes. I'm Captain John Miller of the Earth ship Defiant." The alien bowed slightly. "I am Elex, navigator of the Araxian scout vessel Harmony's Light. We thank you for responding to our call." More aliens appeared behind Elex. They all looked tired and afraid. "What happened to your ship?" Miller asked. "We were damaged while fleeing," Elex said. "Fleeing from the Galactic Concord." "What's the Galactic Concord?" Brown asked. Elex's colors shifted to darker shades. "They are the reason we must warn your people immediately. They are coming for Earth next." Over the next hour, the humans learned the truth. The Galactic Concord was a coalition of advanced species that claimed to protect the galaxy. In reality, they conquered less developed civilizations and took their resources. Those who joined willingly became client states. Those who refused faced blockades or worse. "How do you know about us?" Miller asked. "The Concord has been watching Earth since you developed radio," Elex explained. "Now that you have faster-than-light travel, they will come with an offer you cannot refuse." "And if we do refuse?" Harris asked. All the Araxians' colors darkened at once. "The last species that truly fought back was erased from the galaxy," Elex said. "We escaped to warn you. You have perhaps 6 months before they arrive." Miller looked at his team. Their faces showed the same mix of fear and determination he felt. "Then we have work to do," Miller said. "Let's get your people to safety, and then head home. Earth needs to prepare." 6 months passed quickly. Earth prepared as best it could, But how do you prepare for something you've never faced before? The Araxians helped, sharing what they knew about Concord technology, but they were refugees, not warriors. Lisa Wright stood at the window of the United Nations building in New York, watching the snowfall. As Earth's ambassador to alien species, a job that hadn't existed 7 months ago, she carried a heavy burden. "They're here," said General Frank Peters, walking up beside her. Wright nodded. The massive ships had appeared in orbit that morning. 7 of them, each bigger than anything humans had ever built. They just sat there, waiting. "Are we ready?" she asked. Peters sighed. "As ready as we can be." The meeting room was large, with a round table in the center. Wright sat with UN Secretary General Amanda Collins, General Peters, and Science Advisor Kevin Pottle. Across from them were 3 aliens. The tallest was clearly in charge. Its skin was pale blue, with ridges where a human would have eyebrows. It wore a complex outfit that seemed partly armor, partly formal wear. "I am High Executor Zeltak of the Galactic Concord," it said. Its voice was deep, with an odd echo. "These are my advisors." "Welcome to Earth," said Collins, though her smile was tight. "I am Secretary General Collins. This is Ambassador Wright, General Peters, and Dr. Patel." "Let us not waste time," Zeltak said. "You know why we are here." Wright nodded. "The Araxians told us." A flash of anger crossed Zeltak's face. "The Araxians are criminals who fled their duties. But yes, we come with an offer of protection and advancement." "And what does this offer involve?" Wright asked. Zeltak smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "The Concord will provide Earth with advanced technology, medical knowledge, and protection from threats you cannot imagine. In exchange, Earth will provide 30% of its mineral resources, accept Concord oversight of its governments, and contribute ships and soldiers to Concord Defense Forces." The room was silent. 30% of Earth's resources would cripple the planet's economy. Concord oversight meant losing control of their own destiny. "And if we refuse?" General Peters asked. "Then we regretfully implement protective isolation," Zeltak said. "For your own safety, of course." "Meaning?" Wright pressed. "A blockade. No ships in or out. No communications with other worlds. Earth would be alone, cut off from the stars you have just begun to reach." Dr. Patel, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "And how many civilizations have refused your offer?" 3, Zeltak said. "All eventually saw reason." What he didn't say was what happened before they saw reason. The Araxians had told them those stories. "The UN Security Council will need time to consider your terms," Collins said. "1 month," Zeltak replied. "We are generous, but not infinitely patient." After the aliens left, the humans remained seated. "We can't accept those terms," Peters said. "We may have no choice," Collins replied. "You saw their ships." "Actually," Patel spoke up, "I noticed something during the meeting." He pulled up images on his tablet. "Look at the devices on their belts. They're shield generators." The Araxians mentioned these. "What about them?" Wright asked. "The power source has a very specific emission pattern. I think there's a fundamental flaw in how they work." Patel looked excited. "If I'm right, we might be able to disable their shields. Without shields, their advantage isn't as overwhelming." "Can you prove this?" Peters asked. "Give me that month and a team of our best engineers." "Even if you're right," Collins said, "are we seriously considering fighting an advanced galactic power?" Wright looked out the window at the New York skyline. "We're considering fighting for our freedom. History teaches us what happens to civilizations that surrender to colonizers. The entire planet needs to decide," Collins said. "I'll call for a global vote." That night, Wright couldn't sleep. She stood on her apartment balcony, looking up at the stars and the huge shapes blocking some of them. 1 month to decide the fate of humanity. 1 month to choose between submission and war. The Concord clearly expected them to submit. They always did. But the Concorde had never met humans before. For the next 3 weeks, Earth became a planet of debates. In every town, city, and country, people argued about what to do. Schools held special classes about the choice. News channels ran nonstop coverage. Everyone had an opinion. Admiral Paul Martinez stood before the UN Security Council. His uniform was crisp, his face stern. The Concorde ships are powerful, yes, he said, but they are not invincible. Dr. Patel's team has confirmed the shield weakness, and we have advantages they don't expect. Such as, asked the representative from India. Humans are excellent at war, Martinez said simply. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. The Concorde fights through overwhelming force, not skill. They haven't had a real war in centuries. Secretary General Collins frowned. And you think this makes up for their technology advantage? No, Martinez admitted, but it gives us a chance. A small one, but real. Across town, Samantha White worked late in her office at intelligence headquarters. As the lead analyst on the Concorde threat, she had been studying everything the Araxians told them, looking for patterns. Her phone rang. It was Lisa Wright. Sam, please tell me you have something, Wright said. The vote is in 1 week. I do, White replied. I've confirmed what the Araxians told us. The Concorde has taken over 17 species so far. 3 tried to resist. What happened to them? White took a deep breath. The first was blockaded for 10 years until their economy collapsed. The second had their major cities bombed from orbit. The third was almost wiped out. The Concorde targeted their food production. 90% of their population starved. Wright was silent for a moment, but all 3 eventually submitted. Yes, and all 3 now provide troops that fight for the Concorde. The conquered become the conquerors. So we're damned either way, Wright said softly. Maybe not. White pulled up a file on her computer. The Concorde has never faced a species with our level of military development that chose to fight. We're more advanced than the others were when the Concorde found them. You sound like you're suggesting we fight. White thought about it. I'm suggesting we need to know what we're choosing. Submission isn't safety. It's just slavery with better marketing. The UN General Assembly Hall was packed on voting day. Every nation had a representative present. The galleries were full of journalists, scientists, and military officers. Secretary General Collins stood at the podium. The vote before us today is the most important in human history. Each nation has 1 vote. Accept the Concorde's terms, or reject them. Admiral Martinez sat with Dr. Patel in the gallery. If we vote to fight, can your shield disruptors be ready in time? We already have working prototypes, Patel said. Mass production can start tomorrow. In the diplomatic box, Lisa Wright watched with Ambassador Alex from the Araxians. No matter the outcome, Alex said, your people have shown great courage in considering resistance at all. Let's hope courage is enough, Wright replied. The voting began. Each nation's representative pressed a button at their seat. The results appeared on a large screen at the front of the hall. As each vote came in, the room grew more tense. China, reject. United States, reject. Russia, accept. Brazil, reject. India, accept. Nation after nation made their choice. Some chose the safety of submission. Others chose the risk of freedom. After 3 hours, all votes were in. Collins returned to the podium, her face grave. The final tally is 108 nations for rejection, 85 for acceptance. The room erupted in noise. Some cheered. Some protested. Some simply sat in shocked silence. By majority vote, Collins continued when the noise died down. Earth formally rejects the terms offered by the Galactic Concorde. In orbit, the Concorde ships received the message. Inside the lead vessel, High Executor Zeltak seemed almost pleased. So they choose war, he said to his officers. Prepare the fleet. We will teach them the cost of defiance. But on Earth, something was happening that Zeltak could not understand. Factories were converting to weapon production. Military bases were buzzing with activity. Scientists were working around the clock. For the first time in generations, all of humanity had a common enemy. And humans, when united, were something the galaxy had never seen before. The first attack came 3 days after the vote. A Concorde ship fired on a satellite over North America. It was a warning shot, a display of power. The message was clear: submit or suffer. Humanity's answer came in the form of Project Prometheus. Deep underground, in a facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Eric Johnson worked with a team of 50 scientists. They had been given unlimited resources and one mission: exploit the weakness in Concorde shield technology. The problem isn't making it work, Johnson explained to Admiral Martinez. The problem is making it small enough. They stood in a large testing chamber. At the center was a device the size of a small car. This prototype can disable a Concorde shield for 30 seconds, Johnson said. But it's too big to mount on our ships. How long until you can make it smaller? Martinez asked. 2 weeks, maybe less. You have 1 week, Martinez said. The Concorde is moving more ships into position. They're preparing for a full attack. Meanwhile, in a different facility, civilian engineer Olivia Garcia led a team working on stealth technology. The Araxians had explained that Concorde sensors detected energy signatures from ships. Garcia's team was developing a way to mask those signatures. Think of it like this, Garcia said to Ambassador Wright during a demonstration. Every ship gives off heat, radiation, and electromagnetic signals. We can't eliminate those completely, but we can make them look like background noise. She pressed a button, and a small drone on the testing range seemed to fade from view. It wasn't invisible, but on the sensors next to Wright, it registered as nothing more than space debris. Will this work on larger ships? Wright asked. We're scaling it up now, Garcia answered. Within 2 weeks, we can retrofit our entire fleet. Around the world, civilians prepared for war. Cities built underground shelters. Farmers stored food. Medical supplies were stockpiled. Everyone knew the first strikes would target major population centers. In Washington, D.C., President George Bell addressed the nation. We face an enemy unlike any we have known, he said. But throughout history, humans have stood against tyrants, against those who would take our freedom. We will not submit. We will not surrender. And we will not go quietly. On the moon base, Commander Ben Kelly oversaw the installation of new weapon systems. The moon would be humanity's first line of defense. The Concorde expects us to cower, Kelly told his troops. They expect us to break under their first assault. We will show them how wrong they are. The Araxian refugees proved invaluable during this time. They shared everything they knew about Concorde tactics, technology, and weaknesses. Some even volunteered to fight alongside humans. Your world has given us shelter, Elex told Wright. We will help defend it. 2 weeks after the vote, human intelligence detected a large Concorde fleet assembling near Mars. The attack was coming. In a secure room beneath the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff gathered with President Bell. We have 2 options, Admiral Martinez said. Wait for them to attack and try to defend Earth, or strike first. Can we win a first strike? Bell asked. Martinez nodded to Dr. Johnson, who had joined the meeting. The shield disruptor is ready, Johnson said. It's the size of a microwave now. We can put it on our fighters. And the stealth tech? Bell asked. Operational, Martinez confirmed. We can get a small fleet close to their forward base without detection. What about casualties? Asked the Secretary of Defense. High, Martinez admitted. We might lose half the attack force. But if we wait for them to attack Earth, civilian casualties will be in the millions. President Bell looked around the room. I need your recommendations. Do we strike first? One by one, they gave their answers. The vote was unanimous. Bell nodded grimly. Then it's decided. Prepare Operation First Strike. We take the fight to them. As the meeting ended, Wright pulled Martinez aside. "The Concorde has existed for thousands of years," she said. "No one has ever successfully fought them." Martinez looked her in the eye. "No one has ever been human before." Captain Steve Bennett stood on the bridge of the U.S. Ranger, a stealth cruiser built in the 2 weeks since the vote. His ship led a fleet of 20 vessels, all equipped with Garcia's stealth technology and Johnson's shield disruptors. "Status report," Bennett said quietly. "All ships in position," replied his first officer, Susan Lee. "Stealth systems working perfectly. Concorde sensors show no sign they've detected us." Bennett nodded. The human fleet had gathered on the far side of an asteroid field near the main Concorde forward base. This base, a massive space station, controlled 1/3 of the Concorde's regional fleet. Taking it out would buy Earth precious time. "Weapons status?" Bennett asked. "Shield disruptors charged and ready," said Weapons Officer Carl Wright. "Quantum entangled disruptors armed." The quantum entangled disruptors were humanity's secret weapon. Developed by Dr. Johnson's team, they created a reaction that spread through connected shield systems, causing them to overload. One hit could disable multiple Concorde ships if they were linked. "All ships, final checks," Bennett ordered over the secure channel. "Remember the plan. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we get out. No heroics." Bennett looked at the holographic display showing the Concorde base. It was beautiful in a cold way, all smooth lines and glowing blue energy. Nearly 300 Concorde ships docked there, with thousands of Concorde personnel inside. "This is for Earth," he whispered, then spoke up. "All ships, execute attack pattern Alpha. Launch when ready." 20 human ships moved silently through space, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible. They approached the Concorde base from different angles, using the asteroid field for additional cover. On the Concorde base, life continued normally. High Commander Vextor reviewed reports on the human planet. Their ships were in position for a full assault in 3 days. The humans had rejected their generous offer, and now they would learn the price of defiance. An alarm sounded softly. A junior officer approached. "High Commander, sensors detect unusual energy readings near Section 14. Investigate," Vextor ordered, unconcerned. "Probably just asteroid debris." The U.S. Ranger was the first to strike. As they closed within range, Bennett gave the order. "Activate shield disruptor." A pulse of energy shot from the Ranger, invisible to the naked eye, but devastating to Concorde shield technology. It hit the base's main shield generator, causing it to flicker and fail. "Shields down," Lee reported. "We have 60 seconds before backup systems engage." "All ships, fire quantum disruptors," Bennett ordered. From 20 points around the base, human ships fired their weapons. The energy beams struck the now unshielded station at critical points, causing cascading failures throughout its systems. On the base, chaos erupted. Vextor stared in disbelief as status reports flooded in. "Shields are down. Multiple hull breaches. Reactor systems failing." "Impossible," Vextor said. "How did they?" He never finished his sentence. A secondary explosion tore through the command center. In space, the battle expanded. Concorde ships scrambled to respond, but many were caught in their docking bays when the disruptors hit. As Bennett had hoped, their shield systems were linked, and the quantum entangled effect spread from ship to ship. "It's working," Lee exclaimed. "Their linked shields are falling like dominoes." Bennett watched as explosion after explosion lit up space around the Concorde base. The human fleet continued to fire, targeting key systems and weapons platforms. 30 seconds until their backup shields activate, Wright warned. "All ships begin withdrawal," Bennett ordered. Mission accomplished. As the human ships turned to leave, Bennett took one last look at the Concorde base. Nearly half of it was in ruins, with fires visible through massive hull breaches. Around it, dozens of Concorde warships drifted powerless, or exploded as their own weapon systems overloaded. They had done it. the first successful strike against the Concorde in known history. The human fleet jumped to light speed just as the first undamaged Concorde ships began to give chase. 3 hours later, Bennett's fleet returned to Earth. As they approached, Bennett received a transmission from Admiral Martinez. "Captain Bennett, mission assessment." Bennett allowed himself a small smile. "Sir, the Concorde just learned that picking a fight with humans was the worst mistake they've ever made." Across the galaxy, news of the human attack spread. Species that had lived under Concorde rule for centuries were shocked. The unbeatable Concorde had been bloodied. And suddenly, everything seemed possible. The Concorde response came swiftly and with terrible force. 3 days after the human attack, their main armada entered the solar system. Over 200 warships, led by a massive dreadnought that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. Fleet Admiral Michelle Davis watched from her command center on the Mars Defense Station. She had expected this. The plan was never to stop the Concorde completely, just to buy time and show them humans wouldn't be easy prey. "All Earth defenses on full alert," she ordered. "Execute Operation Scattered Shield." Across the solar system, the human defense force split into small groups. Traditional military doctrine called for concentrating forces, but Davis knew that would make them easy targets for the Concorde's superior firepower. Instead, she had developed a guerrilla warfare strategy for space. "Admiral, Concorde fleet is bypassing Mars defense line," reported her second-in-command. "They're heading straight for Earth." Davis nodded grimly. As expected, signal the lunar defense grid to prepare first-wave countermeasures. On Earth, sirens wailed as cities implemented emergency evacuation plans. Millions of people moved into underground shelters built in the weeks since the vote. Others relocated to rural areas, away from likely targets. The first Concorde bombardment struck major military bases around the world. Bright flashes lit up the sky as energy weapons hit their targets. But thanks to the early warning, casualties were minimal. Most personnel had evacuated to hardened underground facilities. The second wave targeted major cities. New York, Beijing, London, Moscow all took heavy hits. Buildings crumbled and fires spread. Yet the underground shelters held. Humanity had prepared well. In orbit, the lunar defense grid activated. Hundreds of automated weapon platforms, hidden on the moon's surface, opened fire on the Concorde fleet. They couldn't penetrate the larger ship's shields, but they forced the Concorde to divert energy from their bombardment. On the Concorde dreadnought, Supreme Commander Excel Mack watched the assault with growing frustration. "Why are there so few casualties?" he demanded. "Our intelligence indicated billions on the surface." "They appear to have extensive underground shelters," an officer replied. "And their orbital defenses are more robust than expected." Zelmak's eyes narrowed. "These humans are better prepared than any species we've encountered before. No matter. Increase bombardment intensity. Their shelters cannot withstand our full power." As the assault intensified, a small human strike team approached the Concorde fleet from behind. Led by Lieutenant Ryan Clark, they piloted a stealth shuttle toward the dreadnought. Their mission was the most dangerous of the war so far. "Final approach," whispered Clark to his team of 6 Special Forces soldiers. "Stealth systems at maximum. Remember, we have one shot at this." Their shuttle, barely larger than a car, attached to a maintenance hatch on the dreadnought's hull. Using cutting tools, they created an entry point and slipped inside. "We're in," Clark reported back to Earth, beginning Phase 2. The team moved through the dreadnought's service tunnels, avoiding Concorde patrols. Their objective, the ship's central data core, which contained the Concorde's complete military database. After 2 tense hours, they reached their target. While 2 team members stood guard, the others began the hack. They planted specialized devices created by Dr. Johnson that would copy the database and transmit it back to Earth. "Download at 40%, reported Specialist Diane Murphy. 10 minutes remaining." "Hurry," Clark urged. "We've been lucky so far, but—" An alarm blared. They had been discovered. "Defend this position," Clark ordered. "The data is all that matters." The team took up defensive positions as the sound of approaching Concord soldiers echoed down the corridor. The firefight was brief but intense. 3 human soldiers fell, but they took down twice as many Concord troops. "Download complete," Murphy announced. Clark nodded, his face grim. "Initiate Phase 3. Murphy activated the final device they had brought, a compact fusion bomb. 5 minutes to detonation, she said. Time to go. But more Concord soldiers were coming. Clark made a quick decision. "Murphy, take the data and get to the shuttle. The rest of us will hold them off." "Sir, that's an order. This data could win the war. Go." Murphy slipped away as Clark and the remaining soldier lay down covering fire. They knew they wouldn't make it out, but their sacrifice would ensure the mission's success. 4 minutes later, Murphy reached the shuttle and detached from the dreadnought. As she accelerated away, the fusion bomb detonated. The explosion ripped through the dreadnought's central section, not enough to destroy the massive ship, but enough to cripple it temporarily. 1 year passed. Earth was battered but unbowed. The Concorde had expected a quick victory, but instead faced the longest war of resistance in their history. Major cities lay in ruins, with most of humanity now living underground or in scattered rural communities. Space battles raged throughout the solar system. Earth had lost many ships, but for every 5 they lost, they destroyed one of the Concords, a ratio no other species had ever achieved. In a secure underground facility beneath what was once Switzerland, Dr. Eric Johnson presented his latest work to Admiral Davis and Ambassador Wright. The data Lieutenant Clark's team recovered was invaluable, Johnson said. It contained the complete technical specifications of Concorde shield technology. He activated a holographic display showing a small device about the size of a coffee cup. "This is the Mark II shield disruptor," he explained. "It's 10 times more powerful than our first version and can be mass-produced." "How many ships can we equip?" Davis asked. "All of them," Johnson replied with a rare smile. "And that's not all." He pressed another button, and the hologram changed to show a larger device. "This version can protect a small city from Concorde bombardment. We're calling it the Shield Umbrella." Wright looked hopeful for the first time in months. "You're saying we can protect our remaining cities?" "Yes. We're already installing the first ones." Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. On the planet Taurus IV, home to a species conquered by the Concorde centuries ago, riots had broken out. The Taurians had seen that humans could fight back, and after generations of submission, they wanted freedom too. Similar uprisings were occurring on other worlds, small at first, but growing. The Concorde was forced to divert ships to maintain control, thinning their forces attacking Earth. In a secret meeting room, Ambassador Wright met with representatives from 7 alien species, all secretly supporting the human resistance. "The Concorde is stretched thin," said a Taurian rebel leader named Krek. "They never expected to fight on multiple fronts." "We need to coordinate our efforts," Wright said. "A unified resistance could do what none of us can do alone." This meeting gave birth to what would become known as the Freedom Alliance. Wright was named its first leader. On the front lines, Commander Nicole Foster received new orders. She was to take a small fleet of stealth ships to Taurus IV and help the rebellion there. "This is our chance to show the galaxy that freedom is possible," she told her crew as they prepared to depart. "The Taurians have suffered under Concorde rule for over 500 years. It's time they knew what freedom feels like." Foster's mission was dangerous. To reach Taurus IV, they would have to travel through heavily guarded Concorde space. But the stealth technology had improved over the past year, and the data from Clark's mission had revealed gaps in Concorde sensor networks. After 2 weeks of careful travel, Foster's fleet arrived at Taurus IV. They made contact with the rebel leadership and began providing weapons, training, and support. "We didn't think anyone would help us," Krek told Foster. For centuries, the Concorde told us we were alone in our desire for freedom. You were never alone, Foster replied. You just couldn't hear each other. Now you can. With human help, the Taurian rebellion grew from scattered riots to an organized resistance. Other species followed their example. The Concorde, for the first time in its history, faced a genuine multi-world rebellion. On Earth, Dr. Johnson worked tirelessly to complete his greatest project. Using everything they had learned from the stolen Concorde data, he had developed a weapon that could potentially end the war. It targets their communication network, he explained to Admiral Davis. If it works, it will sever the links between all Concorde ships. They'll be isolated, unable to coordinate. And if it doesn't work? Davis asked. Johnson's face grew serious. Then we'll have revealed our position for nothing, and the Concorde will hit us with everything they have. Davis considered this. When will it be ready? 2 weeks. Prepare it, Davis ordered, and send word to all our allies. It's time to gather for a final strike. The message spread throughout the hidden rebel network. Prepare for the reckoning. After a year of bloody war, humanity was ready to take the fight directly to the heart of Concorde power. The final battle took place near Alpha Centauri, humanity's closest stellar neighbor. It was chosen for its symbolic value and strategic position. Here, the combined rebel fleet would meet the Concorde's main armada. Admiral Michelle Davis stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Freedom, the largest and most advanced ship humans had ever built. Around her, officers prepared for battle. On nearby screens, she could see the hundreds of ships that made up their coalition. Human vessels formed the core of the fleet, but they were joined by ships from 7 other species. The Araxians had contributed their fastest vessels. The Taurians brought heavy cruisers hidden from the Concorde for centuries. Other species added what they could, some only a handful of ships, but all flying the same flag, a blue and green Earth, symbol of the first world to say no. Concorde fleet detected, announced the sensor officer. Over 500 ships approaching from Sector 7. Davis nodded calmly. Signal all ships. Battle formation Omega. Remember the plan. The rebel ships spread out, forming a loose sphere. At its center was the Freedom, carrying Dr. Johnson's device, the communications disruptor. It needed to get within a certain range of the Concorde command ship to work. Enemy in visual range, reported an officer. On the main screen, the Concorde Armada appeared. At its head was a ship unlike any they had seen before, twice the size of a normal dreadnought, with a strange apparatus at its front. What is that? Davis asked. Unknown, replied her tactical officer. It's not in any of the files we captured. Ambassador Wright, who had insisted on being present for the final battle, looked worried. The Araxians mentioned rumors of a superweapon called a Harmony. They said it could induce star collapse. A chill ran through the bridge. If the Concorde could destroy stars, this battle might already be lost. We stick to the plan, Davis said firmly. Get me Captain Miller. John Miller's face appeared on a side screen. He had been promoted after the first contact with the Araxians and now commanded a small, fast attack ship. Captain, we need to neutralize that superweapon, Davis said. You're the fastest ship we have. Miller nodded. We're ready, Admiral. As the 2 fleets closed, the battle began. Energy weapons flashed across space. Smaller ships darted between larger ones, launching precision strikes against key systems. The human shield disruptors proved devastatingly effective, allowing their weapons to penetrate Concorde defenses. But the Concorde had numbers on their side, and their superweapon, the Harmony, began to power up. A strange glow built at its front, directed toward the nearby star. We need to move faster, Davis told her crew. All ships, push forward. We need to get the disruptor in range. Miller's ship, the Swift, broke from the main formation. With a small team of volunteers, he accelerated directly toward the Harmony. This is likely a one-way trip, he told his crew. Any objections? No one spoke. They had all seen what the Concorde did to their worlds. This was for Earth, for freedom, for the future. The Swift took heavy fire as it approached the superweapon. Its shields failed, then its engines began to fail. But its momentum carried it forward. Impact in 10 seconds, Miller reported to Davis. The disruptor, is it ready? Almost in position, Davis replied. Just need 30 more seconds. You'll have them, Miller said. Then to his crew, it's been an honor. The Swift collided with the Harmony's main emitter. The explosion was small against the vast bulk of the superweapon, but it was precisely targeted. The emitter cracked, its glow fading. At that moment, the Freedom reached optimal position. Davis gave the order, activate the communications disruptor. Johnson's device powered up, sending waves of energy throughout the battlefield. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, Concorde ships began to drift out of formation. Their coordinated attack fell apart as each vessel lost contact with the others. It's working, Wright exclaimed. Without their communication network, the mighty Concorde fleet became hundreds of individual ships, unable to coordinate. The rebel forces, smaller but united by a common purpose, pressed their advantage. 3 hours later, it was over. The Concorde fleet was in retreat. The Harmony, while damaged, had escaped, but their command ship had been captured intact. With it came the highest-ranking Concorde officials ever taken by any species. On the bridge of the Freedom, Davis received the formal surrender of the Concorde regional commander. This isn't over, the alien said defiantly. The Concorde spans the galaxy. This is merely one fleet. Wright stepped forward. But now every species knows you can be beaten. The message is already spreading across Concorde space. Freedom is possible. 1 month later, Ambassador Wright led the first meeting of the new Galactic Alliance. Representatives from 23 species gathered to sign a charter based on mutual respect and cooperation rather than domination. As she looked around the room at the diverse beings working together, Wright reflected on the moment that had changed everything. The moment humanity chose war. The Concorde had thought that choice doomed humanity. Instead, it had doomed the Concorde itself. Humanity had revealed something the galaxy had forgotten. Freedom was worth fighting for, and no power, no matter how ancient or vast, could stand against those who truly desired it.